It's February 14th, and welcome back to the Squashcast. I'm your host, Rob Beaumont, joined once again by Jesse Engelbrecht.
Hello people, how are you doing? Looking forward to recording another Squashcast for you all. Just going to probably start off by saying a big thank you to a bit of the traction we got from the last one, a couple of retweets, especially from a few high-profile players, Ryan Kaskeli and Garwad. So thanks to them, and hopefully they listen. Maybe they just didn't retweet because we tagged them in it. It would be quite nice for a few of the players to listen more and feel free to throw some comments our way and tell us to shut up, not too much, or tell us to kind of talk more about squash.
Yeah, and it's great to see them getting a bit of publicity throughout the squash media as well. So since we last recorded, we had two major events going on. We had the Swedish Open, obviously in Sweden, and we had quite a few national tournaments going on as well.
Yeah, no, we'll dissect those in a bit more detail, and we're trying something a little bit new on the Squashcast this week where we'll explain it a bit later in it. But yeah, we basically watched the highlights of the final and we're making our comments on it kind of live, so to speak, as we're watching it. But before we get any further, I probably need to send a bit of an apology to Mr. Paul Cole. I think I said he was ranked 20 last month, but it actually moved up to number 16 in the world, which at that stage, moving from 20 to 16, that's pretty hefty kind of jump up, and that just means he's going to be in a lot more kind of main draws. Okay, you look at the top 12, probably in the main draw of a 16 draw tournament, but I think he's really kind of staked his claim that he's going to get himself into that top 10 pretty soon. And also, just on the back of that, a bit of a shout out to fellow compatriot Steve Coppinger, back in the top 20 for the first time, I think in around a year, maybe just over a year. So credit to him for really coming through some tough matches and getting himself back into that top 20.
Yeah, absolutely, and really looking forward to see what Paul can do. Sorry, our table's malfunctioning there. Really interested to see what Paul can do from that position with a better ranking for each tournament, because he's had to go through a lot of qualifying in recent tournaments, and that's going to make the whole process a lot tougher, even though he's a particularly tough guy. We'll look at the Swedish Open to start with, and we're just going to scan down the first round and look at any major upsets, and we see immediately Alan Klein beating Miguel Rodriguez in just under an hour, and not one I'd expect to see, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them similar players, but they are both players of attrition. Yes, Miguel's got a bit more hold and flick, but Alan Klein, one of probably the hardest trainers out there, works so hard to keep to his level and progress. And yeah, credit to him, like a bit of a breakthrough there to beat Miguel Rodriguez, who was the 7th seed. But yeah, it just goes to show Miguel's form, this whole season. We can't really predict where he's going to be getting his wins from, lately. Yeah, I think he had a decentish win or reached his seeding the tournament before, but, another kind of early loss for Miguel is going to probably make him a little bit worried to kind of, maintain his ranking and keep himself in certain positions. So it'd be interesting to see how he progresses there. During the first round, all other results looked pretty standard. So a couple of 3-loves and 3-1s, but in particular, looking at the quarterfinal, you've got the number 1 seed Kareem Abdel-Gawad again against Cameron Pilley at the top. Massive 5-setter, 98-minute 5-setter with Gawad winning 11-6 in the 5th. Not necessarily worrying, because that seems to be Gawad's trend. A couple of early rounds, he's willing to go to 5. He's willing to extend the game loads, get the win, and again, almost looks like he's trying to kind of spend time getting used to the court. Unfortunately, looking at the quarterfinals, there were 2 withdrawals, which is really, really rare. You had Alan Klein, making the most out of beating Miguel in the first round, with Matthew Castagnier having to withdraw in the quarterfinals, which for someone like Alan, that's massive. To get to the semi-finals of a 70k event with where he's at is absolutely huge. But I think credit to him for making that himself. If he hadn't beaten Miguel in the first round, he would never have got the chance to get that walkover. So bit of a concern for Matthew, because he has been out for quite a while, Matthew Castagnier, and this was his first tournament back that we've seen him in, and got through his first round, looked like a relatively tough 3-1 in 52 minutes, but then couldn't even step on court in the quarterfinals. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. And then in one of the other quarterfinals, Simon Rosner got a walkover against Daryl Selby. I know recently Daryl had to pull out of a PSL match, 2-all against Nick Matthew, because he was a bit wary about the court, and there might have been a bit of rumors rumbling that he might have already done an injury there, but he was probably keeping his cards close to his chest. So look, Daryl still had to win the first round match against Omar Magade, who he came through in 70 minutes. So credit to Daryl for getting through that, but then couldn't step on court against Simon. But I know a lot of people were really looking forward to that match. Daryl and Simon, very kind of expressive players, both willing to kind of open the court up, both willing to move the ball around. So such a pity for those two players at this time of the season. And yeah, both players, not the youngest out there, where it could take a little bit longer for their injuries to kind of, get recovered from.
Yeah, and a shame we didn't get to see that sort of little and large battle between the two of them, and hopefully we can have Daryl back on court again soon. With the fourth quarterfinal played on the day was Gaultier versus Tarek Momin. It was a 3-1 to Gaultier. No, 3-2. But the fifth game going 11-2. So 76 minutes. Seemingly, Momin seemed almost out of it after the fourth, even though he won it 13-11.
Yeah, again, I think Tarek looks like he's getting back a bit of form here, taking Gaultier all the way to 5. He's had a couple of good results in recent tournaments. So I think he looks like he's on the upward trend. And yeah, probably Gaultier just having a little bit too much experience and making Tarek work that little bit too hard, because, Gaultier's style when he's on, as we know, and he's got that strut on, so to speak, he is phenomenal, and he can just kind of keep his players just on the edge of their comfort zone for 5, 6, 7, 8 shots in a row. So that's how I would probably see that match panned out. And by the fifth, Greg was just too strong to be able to do, for Tarek to do much in that position. Just moving forward into the semi-finals, in the top half, you had Karim Garwad versus Alan Klein. Credit to Alan, taking the first game, 12-10 against Garwad, and he must have thought all his luck was in, and maybe he was going to get a massive scalp here, but it wasn't to be, and Garwad managed to kind of rein him back in and turn the tables and win that one 3-1 in 54 minutes, so a little bit of a longer match. But then another semi-final, we had Gaultier playing Simon Rosner, which I managed to catch little bits of it, and even though it was a 3-love, it was now a 3-love, and 11-9, 13-11 the first two games. Simon was, millimeters away from nicking one, if not both those games, and credit to him. I think he was playing, if not the better squash, matching Craig kind of point for point. So, Simon almost seems like the almost man at the moment. It's a harsh thing to kind of maybe say to someone of that high of ranking, but he's really on the edge of getting that game, that second game, and winning a match against someone in the top 4 or 5 in the world.
Yeah, Simon's always seemed like the biggest challenge to the top players. Back when Ramy was his most dominant, they seemed to meet each other quite a few times in the last 16 or the quarterfinals, and it would always seem to be a 3-1 or a 3-2. And if you see a scoreline like that, 3-love, you think, oh well, 3-love, what big deal. But with a 58-minute timeline, it clearly shows how tough that match must have been, especially if you compare to how long the other semi-final took, which was 54 minutes, and that was a 3-1. Seemingly Gawad not having too much problem with Alan Klein in that one. And we'll just briefly touch on the final, because we do have our take on the highlights of it coming up for you. But it was a 3-1 to Gaultier, and a little bit disappointing, I felt.
Yeah, a bit of a contributing factor. Garwad's leg was strapped up pretty big. That, I don't know, well, we've seen him strapped up before in tournaments and win, so I'm not sure how much we can look into that. It seemed about time that Greg got a win over Garwad, but it was tipped up to be, a real epic match, and what they've been playing like against each other of recent form was going to be exciting. But yeah, Gaultier taking a 3-1, real kind of strange third game, 11-love to Gaultier, and if you can kind of find it, there's like a little 5-second video of Gaultier dancing when he's drinking. Is one of the best 5 seconds of squash history I think I've almost ever seen. It's unbelievably good. I think someone's kind of tagged it and like, this is how you dance when you beat the world champion 11-love. So credit to him. But hopefully you enjoy our little rambling commentary on the final, which will be coming up soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll try and find that little clip video for us to put up on our Facebook page. Okay, so we're going to move on to something that we've not tried before. what we're going to do is we're going to have the highlights from the Swedish Open final playing in front of us. And if you guys want to follow along at home, we're obviously going to link that to our Facebook group and the Twitter account as well. And basically, we're just going to talk through, as the highlights go, we're going to keep you updated with the score and sort of give you our thoughts as the match goes along. So here we go. So it's obviously Goward versus Gaultier, with the current head-to-head being, heavily in Goward's favour.
Yeah, listen, you'd be backing Goward with his recent run of form. Just looking at the highlights now, it's 4-all in the first game. And I made some comments about Goward before. That was a great shot by Gaultier, taking a wicked straight drop. Just Goward, I think he's got that lovely balance between, playing that straight ball and then whipping in his angles and kind of getting his opponent out of position with these ridiculous angles he can kind of play off.
Yeah, now we see 7-6 to Gaultier in the first, and I think you talk about those angles. He manages to produce beautiful shots from such a short swing, and that's a great short shot from the back from Goward, and Gaultier not being able to pick it up.
Yeah, a little fist bump from Goward there, 6-7 down in the first. Probably knows how big of a point that's going to be. But yeah, there's a great example of him lining it up on that backhand, massive swing right over the top, and then really coming under the ball and chopping it in short. So 10-7 game ball to Goward, and pretty much just kind of mops it up. So, Goward going from 6-7 down all the way through to 11-7, looking pretty imperious. Start of the second game now. Gaultier just chops in a backhand crosswood nick for fun there. Having a look at it here again. Just love Gaultier's technique on that back and the way he keeps that quite cocked wrist. Great counter drop. And yeah, you see the score here. It's the highlights have progressed to 8-2 in Gaultier's favour. So it sounds like he kind of was running away with it here at the moment. And just this rally in particular, he's got Goward all over the place. There we go, the Gaultier chin thrust just coming out there for show. So Gaultier 9-2 up in the second, looking the stronger of both players here. But this is when Gaultier is at his best, when he's strutting around, when he's moving the ball around the court, so dominant. 10-3 game up to Gaultier. Yeah, you can't really leave it on Gaultier's backhand up there. He's going to be chopping it in. Goward does well to stem the flow a bit. But you can kind of see, I think Goward's walking through this one, and just gives up the ghost. So Gaultier's really pumped by that one.
Yeah, beautiful lob winner there, just not coming out of that back corner. We're at 4-love now in the third game, and Gaultier just looks to be controlling the centre of the court so easily, and easily throwing in winners left, right and centre. 5-love.
Yeah, body language, Goward kind of staying in, but just walking through most of these shots, and just kind of putting a racket on it. And eventually in this last one, Gaultier chops at it, and Goward's so out of position. Quite rare to see this in the final, especially with the head-to-head of Goward dominating Gaultier. But, you're looking at Gaultier now really getting into his third, fourth, fifth gear. Just looks like Goward is completely reactive at this point. There's no real plan going on. Gaultier is the one dictating and dominating everything, and Goward is kind of like just going, oh, well, let me just throw a short ball in here, let me just put a cross court in there, with no real plan and structure. Yeah,
he looks to be really suffering with that left leg. It's really bandaged up going up the left hamstring, and you saw in the last rally where he's trying to come across court, he doesn't really want to put much pressure on it, so his lateral movement is really compromised in this match.
So 10-love, like you don't see that score often in any of the PSA stuff at the moment, especially not in the final with two of the hot players out there at the moment. Yeah, injury-wise, I think we've got to take that into account. Goward probably just looking to protect his injury quite a bit. So they're coming off 11-love to Gaultier. It's a pity they didn't show Gaultier's dance at that point, because he had like a wicked dance going on after he'd won 11-love. Going into the fourth game now, Gaultier 5-3 up. Goward looking a bit more alive here, starting to get onto a few balls, taking in a few short balls, and forcing Gaultier to kind of turn a cross court. Gaultier had a few heavy movements, especially into that backhand deep, sliding into it. So 4-5, you kind of almost go, all right, is this where Goward starts to step up again? All that experience, and not all that experience necessarily, but all that winning he's done recently, could turn this in his favour.
Yeah, and he still doesn't even look happy winning that point having forced Gaultier to hit the tin, I think he's just thinking that, what does he have to do to hit a clean winner at some point? And Gaultier's retrieval throughout this match has been superb, except for that point. 7-6 to Gowad.
Yeah, body language just changed. You see Gawad, fist pumping, and Gaultier kind of clenching his teeth a little bit in anguish. Gaultier putting in those big lunges. You can see Gawad trying to fire himself up here. Great little hold he put in there as well, just to check Gaultier's movement. Even though Gaultier is quick in a straight line, just that hold did the damage. But then it turns to 10-8, match ball. Quickly Gaultier manages to stem that flow and get it back on even terms. So quite a good rally up and down the backhand. Both players a bit cat and mouse at the moment. Gaultier probably likely to take more risks here. But he's playing well, keeping it steady. And Gawad just can't afford to do anything at the moment, really. He just got to get the ball back on the front wall and take a bit of an opening when he sees one. There's a lot of cat and mouse up and down that backhand.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the longest rallies of the match because neither player is looking to make a mistake. Unfortunately, Gowad puts that ball out on the backhand, and that's 11-8 game and match.
Yeah, nice mutual appreciation from both players. Big long hug and good chat again. They look like they're becoming quite good friends, these two, with all the battles they've played recently. It'll be interesting to hear or know what they're saying. But yeah, just reflecting back at the last time where Gaultier lost 3-1 to Gawad, and how gracious he was in defeat, and again Gaultier looking pretty gracious in victory as well. So, becoming one of the elder statesmen on the tour now.
Yeah, and with the national tournaments this recent weekend, we didn't see Gaultier play in that because he was playing with Gowad in an exhibition somewhere in the States, which is great to see that they are being friends on and off the court, and we get to see some great sportsmanship as well.
Quite controversial not playing in your home nationals, going for an exhibition match, probably for higher money, but I'm sure Gaultier's won his fair few share of national titles, so maybe it wasn't high on his priority list, but I can imagine the French Squash Federation might not be all too happy with him off playing exhibition matches when the national championships is on.
So we'll jump straight into the few national tournaments that went over the last weekend, and I think the best place to start is probably the French nationals. We saw Lucas Cern versus Gregoire Marche in the final of the men's, and it was a 3-2 match. First seed versus second seed, but we're missing sort of Mathieu Castagnet and Greg Gaultier. Yeah,
I think you've got credit to Lucas Cern for getting his national title there. You probably got to feel a little bit for Gregoire Marche, easily probably class as the highest seed, more experience. We've seen him a lot on Squash TV, and Lucas still kind of, learning his trade, so to speak. Yeah, he is progressing nicely. So I think Gregoire would be pretty disappointed not to snap up that opportunity, considering Greg and Matthew weren't both in that. But yep, credit to Lucas for winning it. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see next year how it's all going to pan out, whether Greg's going to come back to it, whether Matthew's there. But yeah, good to see two new names on it. And then looking at the women's, we had Colleen versus, excuse me for the pronunciation, but Julie Rossignol. Is that right, Rob?
Rossignol.
Thank you. Your French is way better than mine. In Zimbabwe, I think French wasn't quite high on our schooling. So yeah, Colleen, the number 1 seed, winning 3-love, beating the 5-8 seed Julie.
Yeah, only 23 minutes for that ladies' match. Shame not to see Camille Somme there, but I think she's probably got the same priorities as Greg Gaultier, looking at the PSA Tour and maybe resting up for some big matches coming forward. So now we can jump to our home tournament, as it were, being based in the UK, with the British Nationals taking place in Manchester. And there was quite a lot of this tournament put out on social media, which I really enjoyed seeing. We had a lot of photos from the National Squash Centre next to Manchester City Stadium, with a lot of publicity done by players like Laura Mazzara and Nick Matthew, which was really great to see. They put out a show court on that indoor athletics track they have there.
Yeah, really good to see, and there was a lot of commentary on it. It looked very professional, the most professional I've seen the British Nationals in recent times. they had it live streaming. I don't think it was on YouTube, but they gave a link of live streaming stuff. I think the finals and even the semi-finals. And yeah, it was great to see how professional it looked. It was a little bit tainted with obviously Daryl Selby not being able to play in it. He had to withdraw quite early on, and there was a few redraws and a few things being jigged around. And unfortunately, there was a couple of withdrawals during the tournament as well. We saw Tom Richards withdrawing against Declan James, and we also saw James Willstrop, the number 2 seed, withdrawing against Joe Lee. So unfortunately, like Tom, the 3-4 seed, and James, the 2 seed, going out in the quarterfinals really opened the draw up for anyone to, well, I say anyone to take. You obviously had Nick Matthew in there still being imperious as he always would. And yeah, look, Nick winning his 9th national title, fantastic effort. There's not many people are going to be able to win that, and I'm sure he's going to go for the Big Ten, and to get 10 times on the trophy will be phenomenal for him. But massive shout out to Joe Lee, getting past James, albeit James had to withdraw, but then really backing up that win by beating Adrian Waller in the semi-finals, where I know Adrian is probably slightly higher ranked than Joe, both on PSA and on the England setup as well. So yeah, credit for Joe to getting there. And yeah, it just looked like he couldn't really get a foothold of Nick in that final. He was exchanging quite nicely and the rallies were good, but Nick just seemed like he was on top most of the time, just turning the screw. But Joe did really well in the third to kind of lose at 11-8 and really test Nick out there. And if Joe nicks that third game, all of a sudden the tables might turn a bit, and I don't know where the nerves would set in with Nick, but it could be a debate.
Yeah, and it's a great deal of experience for a player like Joe Lee, who probably hasn't been around as long as a lot of the other players in this draw. I think if you put anyone in that 5-8 seed area with Declan James and Adrian Waller and Joe Lee and who else have we got? Ben Coleman. I think any one of those 4 could have beaten each other on the day. So it really does show that the England program is coming forward as it goes.
Yeah, you obviously got a couple of worthwhile mentions here. Jamie Haycock's one of the older guys as well, doing well against Ben Coleman in the first round, but knocking out a 5-8 seed. And then you've also got Adrian Waller beating Alan Klein, the 3-4 seed, who Alan had just come off, obviously, the back of the Swedish. Maybe a bit of fatigue might have been a factor there, but I think Alan's confidence would have been pretty high off the back of him doing well at the Swedish Open. So credit to Adrian Waller. And yeah, it was pretty open in that sense. But you just look at it, you see Nick coming through that top half, and just 3-love, 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 and 3-love in the final as well. So pretty convincing once James had been knocked out and withdrawn through injury. And it would have been nice to see those two do battle again recently after the 10-year hex that James had just kind of turned over on Nick. So it would have been a real kind of interesting battle if both those players were fit and firing on all cylinders, and I think a lot of people were looking forward and hopefully expecting that. And let's hope we do see these two players playing again at some point, whether on the PSA or at the British Nationals next year, because it would be good to see if Nick can kind of get his domination back by starting to win the next match.
Yeah, and it's a shame we didn't get to see James against Nick in that final. On the Squashcast previously, we have done a bit of prediction, but I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jess, and ask you who out of these up-and-coming players, obviously not Nick and James and Alan Klein, but who of these up-and-coming players you think is most likely to push towards the top 20 and the top 10 and maybe even the world number 1 spot?
World number 1, that's such a long way away. I think for some of these players, if I'm honest, I think a lot of them would be very happy to take a top 10, top 8 position and see how it goes from there. Joe Lee he's had a couple of tough years, but this I was really glad to see that he's broken through, so to speak, and got to the final of this Nationals, his first final he's ever got to in the Nationals. So I would say at the moment Joe's looking a good contender if he can kind of use this recent form and that bit of confidence he can take from this. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Declan. I think he's got a really kind of nice frame to him, the way he plays. He's got very Nick Matthews style technique and movement. I believe he does get coached by Nick's coach as well, DP. So I think he can really kind of cause some upsets in the upcoming years. Ben Coleman, I would have liked to kind of say yes, but of recent form, he's gone a little bit under the radar, but quiet. I'm not sure if he's got a few injuries and a few niggles kind of holding him back a bit. So it would be interesting to see how he can bounce back. But I'd say between Declan and Joe, if they can kind of, progress the way they're doing, it would be great to see. Got to obviously mention Adrian Waller as well. Getting to the semi-finals of Nationals is no mean feat. Again, he had a breakthrough a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, and hasn't really seemed to kind of back it up. So it would be interesting to see if this could be a bit of a catalyst for him to kind of take the bull by the horns and go, right, semi-final of his Nationals. Let's see if he can kind of get a scalp of someone in the top 16 in the next few months or so.
Yeah, I think I would really like to see a player like Declan James come forward, because he's such a nice guy, and he puts in a hell of a lot of work in his training. So we'll jump over to the ladies, and it's title number 4 for Laura Mazzaro. A great win against SJ and Sarah Jane Perry in the final. 42 minutes for a 3-love, and they recently met each other in the Tournament of Champions, and they obviously know each other incredibly well. But in my mind, it was never really in doubt that Laura would take this.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of looked like with Nick, as soon as James went out, I know all the seeds were still in the ladies' draw. There was no withdrawals in the ladies. But yeah, I think Laura probably is just that half a yard ahead of the other girls at the moment. Credit to Sarah Jane for beating Alison Waters in the semi-final. Alison, the 2 seed. I'm sure Alison was a bit gutted by that, because Sarah's a few years younger than Alison, and Alison probably wants to maybe get a few more titles a little bit later on in her career. So, Alison had a massive 5-setter with Tesney Evans in the quarters, coming through that 3-2, 11-9 in the 5th. So I think that probably had a bearing on her playing the next match. What I found quite interesting as well was Jenny Duncalf, the 5'8" seed. She'd flown back all the way from Australia, I believe, or she was within Europe somewhere. She's looking really well tanned and and looking like she just got off a beach. And probably kind of the results maybe showed it. Shame she just struggled through her first round match, 62 minutes, 3-2 against Millie Tomlinson. But then got undone pretty convincingly by Emily Whitlock, the 3-4 seed, in the quarterfinals in only 28 minutes. So yeah, I'm not sure where she's going with her squash at the moment. Obviously, being out in Australia, she's a bit isolated, but hopefully she's training, and I'm sure Commonwealth Games is going to be up on her list, because it's in her backyard, and she lives in Brisbane, where I believe it is Brisbane or Adelaide. I think it's Brisbane. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where she goes from there. But yeah, kind of went to form. Laura coming through, top half relatively comfortably, dropping a game to Fiona Mobley and dropping a game to Emily Whitlock, but then kind of turning on when it really mattered in the final 3-love against Sarah Jane. Yeah,
and being in Manchester at the end of January, I got a chance to see Emily Whitlock training up on the glass court that they have there. Really shows the contrast of preparation that some players have. Talking of Jenny going to Australia, I know I'd rather be in Australia than maybe Harrogate, where she's from. Having spent a lot of my time there as a child. I think this was a fairly standard tournament for the ladies, but it does just sort of show the depth we have, with 1, 2, 3, 4 making it through to the semi-finals. So that'll probably do us for this week. We've got a few tournaments coming up on the PSA World Tour, with the Windy City Open. That's men's and women's. Both of those are 150k, so quite a few names. I already know for the men's that Sarah Gosel has dropped out, and unfortunately Laura Mazzaro has dropped out of the ladies, opening up plenty of opportunities for those players in that tournament. I might be wrong there. She might have dropped out of the Cleveland Classic. I'll have to double check that. Coming up in March, we've got the Canary Wharf starting on the 4th, ending on the 10th. A great tournament that I've been to a couple of times. Quite a small arena, but you don't need a lot of space for a squash court. Really good atmosphere, great fans, and a great tournament. On at the same time, starting on the 6th, is a Colombian tournament. It's another 70k. It's actually a ladies tournament in Colombia, in Florida Blanca. I don't know if this one will be on Squash TV. Hopefully we'll get some highlights from that if available. And then looking towards the end of March, we've just got the British Open up in Hull, which not quite Colombia, but we'll see how it goes.
we've just got the British Open, like it's a passing tournament. No, so yeah, a good few tournaments to kind of have a look at. We'll try do a recording, I think pretty soon after the Canary Wharf if we can, and then that'll give us a little bit of a gap before the British Open. So again, thanks to everyone out there. Thanks for all the traction that we're gaining, and yeah, please do keep passing it on and retweeting and posting it, and yeah, tell your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely try and get something for the Canary Wharf. That being one of my favourite tournaments that we have out on the tour. So don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'll try and put a few more things up on Instagram. I'm trying to get some recordings of Jesse as he coaches maybe sometime, and we will have all our podcasts up on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube as always. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.